From the rain-swept shores of the North Saskatchewan River right here in scenic Prince Albert, this is Jack Antonio coming at you for Do You Know Jack? And on the line with me today, I have the one and only man, myth, and or legend himself, Jason Charles Miller. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great. How are you? I think I might be all three: a man, a myth, and a legend.
Yeah,
that's what life's goals are all about, right? If you can become all three, then you're good. And I'm working on it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, now, of course, the reason for my call to begin is you've released quite a interesting music video for your track "Get Thee Behind Me." I guess the operative word or question is. In this video, you kind of take on a couple of different roles. I mean, how difficult was it to portray each role as the, I guess, for lack of a better word, session progressed?
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. So, for people who haven't seen it, I portray kind of like a wandering version of myself, and then, of course, I portray the devil. So that was really fun. And although challenging in the respect of we were in the middle of the desert, it was incredibly hot. And then to make things hotter, we set the ground on fire because, we needed it to be even hotter than it was, I guess. But as long as it looks good, right?
Yeah. Well, now who was
responsible? I think it did.
I was just going to ask now, who is responsible for, visually your, for lack of a better word, Satan costume?
Right. So actually, my friend Vivka made those horns and hood, and then the costuming department kind of handled the rest with the armor on my legs and arms and cloak and things like that. But the horns are really what make it. And she's actually a friend of mine who's a cosplayer and had made this crazy, as she called it, I think the sandwich costume. And I saw those horns and I was like, hey, you know what? Those horns would look awesome for this video that I'm doing. Can I borrow your horns? So that was an interesting conversation. And she's actually, what's cool is Vivka is in my last video. So my video that came out in March, Running, where we're playing in a haunted house with two vampires. She's one of the vampires.
Oh,
so
okay.
In one way or another, she's contributed to two videos now, which is great.
Well, there you go. I mean, guide us through the song itself, because there's a reason why you've sort of decided to go with the I guess for lack of a better word, satanic imagery of the video.
Yeah, we can call it that. Right. So I think everybody who either grew up Christian or around Christian or grew up going to church are at least somewhat casually familiar with the story that Jesus wandered in the desert for 40 days and Satan tempted him with all of these, earthly delights and things like that. And I thought it would be interesting to write a song from Satan's perspective, because the story goes he eventually gets so frustrated that he just leaves. And I thought, well, what was going through his mind, and I have it's not sympathy for the devil per se. It's just maybe empathy or just looking at it from that side.
Yeah.
Not trying. And what's interesting is when people hear the song, if they are sort of deeply Christian, I've never really gotten any complaints, because to them, it's just another aspect of the story. And so I guess I haven't managed to piss too many people off yet. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, well, that was definitely going to be a question of mine too, is given the fact that you are sort of, in orbit around Outlaw and country rock, but perhaps, a more heavier side. I mean, the stereotypical Southerner often is known maybe as a Bible thumper. So when I was reading through the subject material of the video, I wondered how this will play out with, some of
Right.
Jason's fan base, but it sounds like things are pretty chill so far.
Pretty chill so far. I mean, I think if you're a fan of mine, and if you dig, just scratch the surface of the things that I've done, you're going to know that I've sort of dabbled in a lot of subjects. I'm not your traditional country artist.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you've made it this far with me, you're not too surprised by this video.
Yeah, well, I mean, just a subtle Google search will find that you fronted, for lack of a better word, I mean, an industrial metal band. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Godhead. So I mean, there you go. Nobody should be surprised with an almost heavy metal style video.
Yeah, and it's funny. I sent it to a lot of my sort of country compatriots, if you will, and they've all been really supportive. I even sent it to Billy Ray Cyrus, and he loves the video. So
wow.
If he loves the video, then I think we're okay.
Well, now that's right. You've co-written a few tracks with Billy Ray Cyrus, which I find fascinating because, of course, due to Old Town Road, the man has managed to vault himself into the collective pop culture consciousness once again.
I know. I'm so happy for him right now, and he's so happy. I actually co-produced his 2016 album called Thin Line and co-wrote a song on that album, but worked on 10 tracks on that record in one capacity or another, sang backing vocals, played acoustic guitar. So I've been friends with Billy for a while now, and he's a real inspiring guy to be around, and is always very supportive of his friends.
Yeah. Did you call him when that track went so crazy viral and be like, dude?
I did. Actually, I think we texted back and forth. But yeah, I sent my congratulations and also just, told him how happy I was for him.
Uh-huh.
He's had a very interesting career, and he's often been considered outlaw himself by the Nashville establishment. So I think to him to have the success of Old Town Road really, kind of flies in the face of the Nashville establishment. And I know he wouldn't have that any other way.
Yeah. Well, now, I mean, your story's not entirely different yourself. I mean, what makes a guy that's, fronting a reasonably successful metal band go solo, so to speak, and end up, doing this kind of outlaw country gig?
Right. Well, so I grew up in the South. I grew up in Fairfax County, Virginia, which is close enough to Washington, D.C. that you could go there on the weekends to see bands play, but far enough away to where I had friends that would not set foot in the city.
Yeah.
So I like to think I got sort of the best of being close enough to a metropolis to experience that, but also, I grew up in the woods, and so country music was always something that was always around me.
Uh-huh.
And when I would write songs on my own, a lot of times they would sound more singer-songwriting, folky, country. But with the success of Godhead, we had a style with all of us together, and so you sort of wrote for that style.
Yeah.
When things started to slow down with Godhead, and I wanted to put solo records out, my thought was I want to put out what's inspiring to me and doesn't fit really in any genre per se, just putting out what I want to put out. And with Godhead, we were, a well-oiled machine, and we had a lot of electronics, and we had a lot of things that we were relied upon to make the show work. But with my current lineup and the music I put out, like I want all organic instruments and everything that's sort of the opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean that makes sense. It's interesting that you would say that you were able to get out to DC in your youth because most of us when we think of the music of DC we think Bad Brains or like Minor Threat. I mean, did you ever have a leaning to hardcore punk?
Yeah, when I graduated from high school, I was involved in Positive Force, which was kind of the very briefly, but I was involved in it. And so they would throw benefit concerts in the basements of churches, and Fugazi would play. Like I was really fortunate to see Fugazi live many times, and so that scene certainly had an influence on me growing up. And Shudder to Think was my favorite band from that era and that time, and still really love to listen to them. So yeah, I mean the DC punk scene, hardcore punk scene, was something that I was involved with on the outskirts of it, but I was never friends with anybody like really in the inner circle. I remember I sent a demo. I had a band before Godhead and before Blind, which was the band that became Godhead. I had a band called Deep, and we were more almost like The Cure. You know what I mean? Like that was probably our biggest influence. And I remember sending our stuff to Discord Records, which was like sort of, and they wrote me back a letter saying like, "Hey, your stuff is really good, but we only sign our friends." and that was, and I was like, "Well, hey, you know what? I appreciate the honesty in that." And then of course I thought, "Well, how can I become your friend?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, fast forwarding to present day, you seem to have quite the list of friends in the country music business. So, I mean, how difficult after your time in Godhead was it really to break into that industry, so to speak?
Well, it was pretty difficult, and I mean, and it still is. But I think that I've gravitated towards the most inclusive members of the bunch, guys that are more on the outskirts of it.
Yeah.
And that way they sort of understand where I'm coming from and vice versa. But, I'm never going to be a mainstream country artist, and that's totally fine with me.
Yeah, well, listening to your stuff, I mean, of course, I really enjoy it, and I've always leaned towards the more outlaw vibe myself. But even in terms of outlaw, like you've got some pretty heavy guitars in the mix in general. I mean, is that sort of coming from those heavy metal and hardcore punk roots? Is that sort of how you still manage to dip into, your early influences?
Absolutely, because I feel like when that chorus hits in any song, the dynamics have to be heavier. The dynamics just have to hit you like a truck. And whether it's country music or metal or rock or hip hop or jazz, when that chorus hits, I want to be bowled over. So I will never stop pushing the envelope in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and it looks like now that you would have spent your 20s in the 90s. So, I mean, you survived the grunge scene, obviously.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I remember meeting Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, like at a small show I want to say in Maryland or something like that. And that was really cool to just be a part, to like observe that as it was coming. And I really love, have you heard Mark Lanigan's solo material? He was the lead singer of Screaming Trees,
right? Yeah,
which was sort of, and his solo material is amazing. I went and saw him in concert last year, and I love like the transition that he took from coming from the heart of the grunge movement to what he does now.
Yeah, it's a little. I don't want to. Maybe easy listening would be the wrong word, but I mean he's definitely got more of a chill vibe. Like this is Screaming Trees. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, there's the band that put out "I Nearly Lost You." So, I mean, one of the first major grunge singles to really break through. So yeah, I mean, I've heard Mark's stuff here and there. I think most famously, on the Mad Season record, which is my absolute favorite grunge record of all time, he's on there, and of course Lane's on there as well. And I think the true genius of Lane Staley really reveals itself, when he's not being harmonized by Jerry, I think. And I love Alice in Chains, so it's a hard thing for me to say.
Yeah. Well, did you notice during a lot of early Alice in Chains records, their voices blended so well together that sometimes you weren't sure who was singing.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like, if you went back and look at it later, you're like, oh, wait, Jerry's singing lead on this part.
Yeah.
So it's interesting going back and listening to those old records and really, like, diving in. And then when you see Alice in Chains now with the new singer, the vibe is still there because Jerry's still there, you know?
Of course. Well, now, when you called me before we hit record, you mentioned you're in the studio. So, I mean, are you working on your own stuff? Or, I mean, I know you produce as well. So what do you got going on today?
Yeah, I'm writing a new record right now because you can never be too far ahead. You know what I mean?
Of course.
And there's a lot of songs that I wrote for the current album, In the Wasteland, that, I'm reworking and looking at, and then writing a lot of new material. And then my side job really is I'm also a voice actor, so I do voices for cartoons and commercials and video games, a lot of video games. And so I actually have a recording complex where, this is where I produce the Billy Ray stuff and a lot of other artists, and we also record actors here for voiceover stuff. So if I'm not working on music, I'm working on something entertainment related.
Right.
Right. I realized I've lived in Los Angeles now for like 18 years or something.
Yeah.
So I put my roots in here and just go. It's like when you love to perform as much as I do on any level, like that just becomes your obsession. It's like your calling, and I never want to stop. So I'm constantly working on new things.
Yeah. Well, I think the trick too to negotiating the turgid waters of the modern day music industry is you kind of have to keep busy and keep your hands in all those different pies, so to speak, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's all like when I was coming up, it was all about, you're a band and you only write music with your band members and you never collaborate with anyone else because you're a band. And those days have changed, and I love the fact that I've written like a dozen theme songs for different, mainly web shows, some television shows, and the fact that I can change my styles as needed for whatever is asked for, and that's. Look, I like to joke that I can fake being Howard Shore for 90 seconds. That's the composer from the Lord of the Rings soundtrack.
Yeah.
Because technology has really helped us get there, and so I love a new challenge, and I love the fact that those things are available to me. So I'm always up for the next challenge. Right. But what's interesting is heavy metal, metal is always going to be a part of me. I just, it came out July 2nd. I sang the theme song to the latest Final Fantasy video game, Shadowbringers.
Wow.
And I didn't write the song, but I got hired to sing it. And it's like this just epic, majestic, awesome song. And I love that just people that know me from my past will still reach out to see, if I want to collaborate with them on something. And I feel so fortunate that I'm able to do that and still put out the music that I want to release as an artist, but yet still, as the artist that I am, collaborate with so many other people too.
Yeah. Well, it's great in this day and age now that, commercial juggernauts like Final Fantasy give the opportunity for, vast sweeping orchestral music to still, maintain a freshness and a newness, right? I mean, and then there's organizations like Video Games Live going out and performing video game music, which I think, maybe
Right.
many classical musicians and artists might turn their nose up because it's, it's video games. But I mean, I think, this medium of video games is, keeping orchestral music alive to a certain extent.
I agree, and it's turning new people onto it. You know what I mean? So keeping it alive for a whole new generation.
Yeah,
which I think is awesome.
Yeah, well, and
because I trained. And like when I was in high school and college, like you trained in classical music.
Yes,
that was what was considered. You need to learn this in order to do all the other things that you do. That classical music was sort of the standard of training.
Yeah, for sure, man. I can definitely agree. I mean, one could argue that in order to have a certain level of success in the business and keep your options open to be, quote unquote, trained, certainly wouldn't hurt. I mean, I'm a trumpet player with a music degree, so you're preaching to the choir.
Right. Well, yeah, and I'm sure that like skills that you learned, you can apply to lots of different genres of music. Like even just techniques that I learned, training in opera, I still use those to this day when I'm on the road because it makes you really self-aware of, and what I am doing this, is that hurting my throat? Is it a strain or is it pain? And knowing the difference and not losing your voice on tour, because I've seen some guys that go out on the road and they scream and throw their voice out, and then by the third show they can't sing. And then that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. Well, that series Zen of Screaming certainly blew the doors open in terms of like metal singers being able to preserve their voice and have a much longer career. Actually, before Christmas, I had Tommy Vext of Bad Wolves in front of me, and what I hadn't realized was he's one of the star vocalists in that original Zen of Screaming video.
Yeah. I know Tommy well, and he is really, he's a technician. He's a craftsman when it comes to technique and singing. So that's cool.
Well, listen, man, I don't want to keep you much longer because I know you got a lot going on today, but it's definitely been a pleasure and an honor chatting with you today, Jason. And I'll just plug the video one more time. Of course, the track is called Get Thee Behind Me, and a simple little YouTube search will bring that up. And of course, you're getting ready to do some touring a little later on this summer as well. So I suppose just to end things off, you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I'm going on tour starting August 20th. I'll be opening for the Allman Betts Band, which are the sons of the Allman Brothers, and they're really carrying that torch and bringing it to the next level and the next generation. And then I will be doing a small club tour across the U.S. that I'm headlining and stopping off along the way on a few places. I'll be playing the Muddy Roots Festival in Tennessee, and then a festival in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. So I'm pretty psyched. I'm ready to rock.
All right, man. Well, it's been great chatting with you today, sir. And, good luck and Godspeed in your future endeavors, although I'm sure this won't be the last time we chat, man. It's been enjoyable.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.